Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, today we begin the study of the second text, which was mentioned would be part of this particular course, which is entitled Introduction to Islamic Virtue Ethics, or we can say an introduction to the discipline or science known as tasawwuf or Sufism, however you like to interpret it. And in particular, we've been focusing on the practical side as opposed to the philosophical side of the particular study of this particular science, which sometimes is even referred to as mysticism. We've been less focused on the mysticism aspect of this, and that is something that someone else definitely could contribute to this particular discussion at another time. We've been studying the text known as al-Murshid Ma'in ala dururi min ulum ad-din, or at least a section of that text, which is authored by the Moroccan scholar Abdullah ibn Asha, who died in the year 1040 after the Hijrah. So perhaps we can say around the 17th century. Now we're going to begin the study of a different text called az-Zubad. And we are particularly interested in the final section of this particular poem, as was the case with the earlier text, which also was a poem. So the poem ends with a section related to the science or the discipline of virtue ethics. We call it tasawwuf. But before talking about the text, I wanted to give a little bit of background about the author and the place that this particular text has had in the Muslim tradition. The author of the text, his name is Ahmed ibn Hussein ibn Ali ibn Arsalan al-Ramli al-Maqdisi, known as a Sufi. That is Ahmed, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali, the son of Arsalan. He's also referred to or known as Ibn al-Aslan. This person or this man was a Shafi'i scholar from Palestine. He was born in the town of Ramla, and in the 14th century, towards the end of the 14th century, and he died in the sort of halfway point, or closer to the halfway point of the 15th century, according to the Hijri dates, that is the year 844, which corresponded to the year 1440 of the Common Era, so the 15th century. Ramli, or we here in this case we'll say this, Ibn Raslan, came from a very pious family. There are a number of generations in his family of very pious people. His father was a merchant who owned a store, and from a very early age, Ibn Raslan had developed a very strong desire for learning. He memorized the Quran at the age of 10, and even though his father insisted that he help him out in his store, he would abandon his father's work, and he would make way to a local school, and he would go and study Islam, and he would disobey the orders of his own father, to the point that in one particular year, the father's store had suffered some type of loss, and he blamed Ibn Raslan for not helping him out in this. So he responded to his father, "La aslahu illa lil-mutala'a," that I'm only fit for study. I'm only fit for study. And after a while, the father just sort of let him go and to continue his studies. He became a great scholar in the Shafi'i school. His most famous teacher was Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the hadith master of the 9th century after the Hijrah, known for his pioneering works in the area of hadith science and the criticism of the transmitters of hadith, and his commentary on Imam Bukhari's Sahih. That happened to be one of the most famous of his teachers. But Ibn al-Aslan also was a jurist. He was an ethicist. He was a hadith scholar. He, in this particular text or this particular poem, it actually, the majority of the poem relates to Islamic law. And in particular, Islamic law according to the interpretation of Imam al-Shafi'i, or we would say according to the school of Imam al-Shafi'i. This particular text actually became part of the curriculum for Al-Azhar University for a number of generations, and I believe it still is studied there even today. So this is an extremely important text, similar to the earlier text we studied from Ibn Abdul Wahid ibn Ashur, which is an extremely important text in the Maliki tradition, that when we think of the perennial texts or writings in the Maliki school, that there actually probably would be three of them, and one of them is the Risala ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, the Mukhtasar of Sheikh Khalil, and thirdly the Murshid Mu'in of Abdul Wahid ibn Ashur. And I say the perennial in the sense that when we think of, or we look at all the different books that have been written pertaining to the Maliki school in particular, that these three books are the most commented on, that they have the most number of commentaries on them. So this text also, we were saying the Shafi'i school, this poem is an extremely important poem, especially being that it was taken up as part of the curriculum for Azhar University. Now the title of the poem, az-Zubad, is a term which is a plural form of the word zubda. Now some of us know what zubda means, right? What does zubda mean? Come on, you Arabic students, zubda. If I ask you, say, if I said to you, "A'tini zubda," you would think I'm asking you for what? What? Yogurt? No, butter. But of course, that wasn't the intent of the title. That this is not it's not meant butter. You know, or we'll say the zubda of something is sort of its froth, or this is most special part of it, the quintessential aspect of a thing. So the title could translate as the quintessentials, plural. So the quintessentials of fiqh, both of the fiqh al-zahir and batin, because remember earlier we talked about how fiqh was divided into the two different areas. One what we call the fiqh of the exterior or the outward, and that's what we usually refer to as the jurisprudence and positive law. And then you have the fiqh or jurisprudence of the interior, which is a reference to virtual ethics, tasawwuf. So fiqh, tasawwuf is a type of fiqh, but it's a fiqh of the interior being, of the mind, of the heart of the individual. The attempt is to make the heart healthy, is to help us to become stronger people who are motivated by the right types of motivations. Right. So that is the title of this particular work. So it begins with a number of chapters related to the normal list of topics in the area of jurisprudence or outward jurisprudence, and then it ends with this epilogue regarding the science of virtual ethics, which is my translation of tasawwuf. So this particular poem begins in the following fashion. The author, he says, "Man nafsuhu sharifatun abiyya yarba'u an umurihi ad-diniyya." The one whose soul is noble and proud will deign his ignoble commands. The one whose soul is noble and proud will deign his ignoble commands. Deign his ignoble commands, meaning that I will deem myself to be above those things. That is to say, those things that are undignified, those things which are haram or unlawful to do, are deemed to be ignoble commands. So if myself gives me a command to do something wrong, that if I'm proud, or I'm a person of proud soul, or if I have a soul, I consider my soul to be noble, then I would deem myself to be unworthy of committing such acts. I would deem myself to be deem it to be inappropriate or unfitting for me to fall into certain types of action or sin. So in one sense, the poem begins by establishing a certain type of spiritual classism, I guess you would say, or emphasizing this idea of that in this realm of spirituality, there is a certain type of classism or type of class attitude that the person who is on this path can benefit from having. That attitude that, because of the type of person I am, or at least the type of person I'm seeking to be, just having such an attitude could prevent me from falling into certain type of actions. Now, of course, that would seem to be a challenge to the very concept or the vice of Kibr, or of arrogance, or pride, or of vainglory, or vanity that we have been told we should avoid. Then we know there are many different causes for Kibr. And remember, Kibr is to reject truth and to look down upon the creation. Generally, well, at least that's one definition, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But a person may be led into this attitude of feeling that one is above others on the basis of the fact that I have knowledge. And Ghazali actually says that the ulama are the most prone to kibr. Right? If you have knowledge, then you're more prone to kibr, to becoming arrogant than other people, because you're constantly bothered by mistreatment. You're constantly expecting to be treated a certain way. When you're not treated that way, or you have a tendency to see yourself above people who are learning from you. Among other things, you see. So having knowledge, it can be a cause of kibr, it can be a cause of arrogance, or a piety itself. If you worship more than other people, I pray more prayers than you do, I fast more often than you do, I give more charity than you do. That can lead to the idea that I am better than you. Your social class can do the same thing. If you feel they're not upper class, they're middle class. They're from the impoverished class, right? I live in a third world country as opposed to a first world country. No, we live in first world countries. We don't live in third world countries, right? So that can be a source of kibr. Courage itself. Persons courageous and others who are not courageous, I can look down upon them. Strength can do this, can do that. Wealth can do it. Beauty can do it. Status can do it. So many things can do it. But this fundamentally is calling us to consider another factor, which is a particular factor which, though outwardly can be looked upon as something negative, can actually be something quite beneficial, which is this idea of that being a member of a spiritual class, or having an attitude that at least I am attempting to become a member of that spiritual class, and that spiritual class includes the prophets and the saints and other type of righteous people. And so if I am pursuing or seeking to become a member of that class, then certain types of things are unbefitting of people who are members of this class. Right, so he begins, "Man nafsuhu sharifatun abiyya," that the one whose soul is noble and proud. If your soul is noble and proud, that you will deign its ignoble commands. You will deign its ignoble commands. You will consider it yourself above the commission of those things. And we already talked about soul as well. Then the word nafs has been applied to so many different things in our tradition and other traditions as well, that sometimes the nafs is just simply a reference to the ego. Sometimes the nafs is a reference to the heart. It can be a reference to our spirit or soul. It can be a reference to intellect, to awareness, to desire, or we can say also as a reference to the entity which perceives and feels and senses. That is the soul as well. And in the Quran, we're given 3 different types of soul. One type of soul called Nafs al-Ammara. Inna an-nafsa la-ammaratun bisu'i illa man rahima rabbi. That verily the soul, it commands evil, save for the one that Allah shows mercy. So we have this soul, the vicious soul, the soul which is inspired or is inclined towards evil, even without having the opportunity to do so, but inclines that way. So the Ammara, this is a bad state to be in. And we take refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this, having this type of soul. And in some aspects of all of us, the Nafs Ammara exists. It just all depends on the appetite. All depends on what type of addictions we have, what type of habits we have. And so some things are harder to overcome than others. So we have the nafs al-ammara, and then al-nafs al-lawama, la uqsimu biyawm al-qiyamati wa la uqsimu bin-nafs al-lawama, the self-reproaching soul. Now this is better than the first one, because though I may commit a sin, my soul will blame me and reproach me for doing so. Right? It reminds me that you shouldn't have done that. Yeah. You shouldn't have done that. And you feel a sense of guilt, a sense of remorse. And so this is moving much more towards a healthy sort of type of soul. And then until this also mentions an-nafs al-mutma'inna, the contented soul, the calm and the serene soul. An-nafs al-mutma'inna, ya ayyatuha an-nafs al-mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiya. O ye serene soul. Right? This is the soul who actually has gained mastery over itself, mastery over its appetites, both the power, the appetitive powers and the intellectual powers. That soul, when it gains mastery over itself, over the nafs and lawama wa ammara, then Allah says to it, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiya, return to your Lord, pleasing and being pleased with, satisfying and with satisfaction from your Lord. Udkhuli fi ibadi, fadkhuli fi ibadi, enter upon my servants, wadkhuli jannati, and enter my garden. So that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to that type of soul. So the heart can be healthy, and this is what we seek, to have a healthy heart. And we want a nafs mutma'inna, but it also can be sick, marid, al-qalb marid, so nafs lawama, nafs ammara, right? Or it can be mayyit, it can be dead, and we take refuge in Allah from the dead soul. So the dead soul is worst of all of them, or the dead heart is the worst of all of them, because that person has no scruples about any type of thing that he or she does. So man nafsuhu sharifatun abiyya yarba'u an umurihi ad-daniyya. Is this clear? I'm feeling just a little sick. I just want to make sure that you guys are following me. So I'm talking a little bit. I feel like I'm not talking the normal way that I usually talk, because I'm still dealing with the cold. So, but it's clear, right? It's okay. Thank you. من نفسه شريفة أبية يربع عن أموره الدنية ولم يزل يجنح للمعالي يسهر في طلابها الليالي. So the one whose soul is noble and proud will deign his ignoble commands and will always incline towards lofty goals, losing sleep in their pursuit during the nights. Losing sleep in their pursuit during the night. So you will be inclining towards lofty goals because you're an honorable person, you're a noble person. The nobles, they pursue lofty goals. They don't pursue ignoble goals, because that will make you not noble once you do that. right? And so you lose sleep in pursuit of these goals as well, right, during the nights. Now, this part of the second verse actually is an allusion to a statement from Imam al-Shafi'i's Diwan, from one of his poems, where he talks about how effort itself, like struggle and effort, are extremely important, that they are necessary. And people who believe that they can achieve great things without any type of effort, are very foolish. So in this regard, he says, بِقَدْرِ الْكَدِّ تُكْتَسَبُ الْمَعَالِي وَمَنْ طَلَبَ الْعُلَى صَحَ اللَّيَالِي. That in accord with the struggle or the effort that one takes, lofty goals are achieved, or lofty things are acquired. وَمَنْ طَلَبَ الْعُلَى صَحَرَ اللَّيَالِي. And whoever seeks the highest of things, then that person will lose sleep during the night. وَمَنْ رَامَ الْعُلَى مِنْ غَيْرِ كَدٍّ أَضَاعَ الْأُمْرَ فِي طَلَبِ الْمُحَالِ. And whoever seeks out the highest of things without any type of effort, then that person wastes his life seeking something which is impossible to achieve. تروم العز ثم تنام ليلا يغوص البحر من طرب اللآلي. Said, you seek prestige, but you sleep during the night times, while the one who seeks the pearls, he dives deep into the ocean. Right. So if one wants pearls, he'll dive deep into the ocean. But you seek prestige, but you don't lose any sleep at night. So basically, he's talking about, again, spiritual effort. He's not talking about necessarily physical or sort of exoteric type of effort. He's talking about spiritual effort. If you want to become a spiritual person, you want to become a better person, then you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice your wants. Not just your needs, sometimes your needs, but you have to sacrifice your wants. That we have appetites. And some say that, the problem with is that we eat too much, we sleep too much, we drink too much, right? We're too stingy. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Sahabi comes and asks him to point me to an action that I could do that will bring me close to Jannah and will distance me from the fire. And the Prophet responded to him, لَقَدْ سَأَلْتَ عَنْ عَظِيمٍ. You have asked about something great, something enormous. وَإِنَّهُ لَيَسِيرٌ عَلَى مَنْ يَسَّرَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. But it is easy for whoever Allah makes it easy for. And he goes on, he tells them, worship Allah, don't associate partners with him, make your salat, give your zakat. And then he says to the Sahabi, he says to him, أَلَا أَدُلُّكَ عَلَىٰ أَبْوَابِ الْخَيْرِ. He said, shall I not then point you to the gateways to goodness? And the doors to good, or the gateways to goodness. And he said, Bala ya Rasulullah. Said, of course. And so he says to him, As-sawmu junnah. He said, fasting is a shield. وَالصَّدَقَةُ تُطْفِئُ الْخَطِيئَةَ كَمَا يُطْفِئُ الْمَاءَ النَّارِ. And charity, it will extinguish bad deeds in the same way that water extinguishes fire. وَصَلَاةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي جَوْفِ اللَّيْلِ. And the prayer that a person makes during the middle of the night. So basically, and he goes on, he recites a verse, and it's a long hadith, but in this particular hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, what he referred to as the gateways to goodness are three things. And one of them was, the first was fasting, the second one was charity, and then the third one was salatul tahajjud, getting up in the middle of the night, losing sleep. Tahajjud is a voluntary prayer, as we know. But we see in each one of them, there's a certain type of sacrifice. The first one, when we talk about fasting, we're sacrificing what? We're sacrificing things that we need, sacrificing food and drink, even sexual gratification during the daytime, right? So there's a sacrifice of that. And the charity, what are we sacrificing? We're sacrificing our wealth, or at least a portion of our wealth, right? We're sacrificing our wealth, our attachment to our wealth. And then lastly, we're sacrificing sleep. Right, so if you want closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there has to be some degree of sacrifice. Right. وَمَنْ رَامَ الْعُلَى مِنْ غَيْرِ كَدٍّ أضاع عمر في طلب المحال. So whoever seeks the highest or the most lofty of things without any effort, then he wastes his life in search for the impossible. Right? تروم العزة ثم تنام ليلا يغوص البحر من طلب اللآلي. Right? So you seek prestige, but then after you go and you sleep at night, while the person who wants the pearls, right, inside the oysters, they do what? They dive deep into the ocean. Right? So this is one of those things. It's one of the things that we have to do if we truly want closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it goes on, he says, وَمَنْ يَكُونُ عَارِفًا بِرَبِّهِ تَصَوَّرَ ابْتِعَادَهُ مِنْ قُرْبِهِ. And the one who knows his Lord imagines being far from his proximity. فَخَافَ وَارْتَجَى وَكَانَ صَاغِيًا لِمَا يَكُونُ آمِرًا أَوْ نَاهِيًا. And the one who knows his Lord imagines being far from his proximity, leading him to fear, hope, and become assiduous concerning all that he orders and forbids. Right. So, if you know your Lord, if you truly know your Lord, then you actually fear being at a distance from him. You hope to be brought closer to him. And one of the ways that you guarantee that is by paying very close attention to what he orders and what he forbids. In other words, what this particular verse, or these two verses, highlight is the belief in a certain type of metaphysical gravity, or a metaphysical gravitational force. Just as we have physical gravity that holds us down to the earth, or if we're, of course, high up in the sky, then the earth is going to pull us down. The force of gravity is going to pull us down. We're going to be propelled towards the earth. Similarly, in the metaphysical realm, in the spiritual realm, there is a gravitational force, and there are certain types of things that propel us. Right? Actions propel us towards Jannah or towards the Nar. Right? So good deeds propel us towards Jannah. Bad deeds, they propel us towards the fire. So as you truly know your Lord, then you will consider the possibility that you may be placed at a distance from him. And if you think about that, then of course you're overwhelmed with fear. Right? But alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reminded us that if you want closeness to us, مَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ, that my servant does not draw near to me with anything more beloved to me than what I have made compulsory for them to do. Right? So you come close to Allah through fulfilling Allah's commandments. And remember, that's your capital. And your voluntary actions, that is your profit. As Ibn Ashur said, so these propel us. And the stronger the deed, the stronger the propulsion. That's the other part too. That if we want to come closer to the hellfire, do a major sin. You want to get closer, do one worse than that. Even closer, do one worse than that. But if you want to come closer to Jannah as well, I can give a penny. Right? Alhamdulillah, Allah will accept it and reward me immensely for it. Right? Well, I could give $100, I could give $50,000, I can give $500,000, right? Or I can sacrifice something. I don't know, but some people, subhanAllah, Allah, He creates some people where they sacrifice everything for the right reasons, right? To save people's lives. You find there are people out there, but so the stronger the deed, the stronger the propulsion. So there's this sort of metaphysical gravity, a gravitational force that does exist, and we believe in it. فَكُلُّ مَا أَمَرَهُ يَرْتَكِبُ وَمَا نَهَى عَنْ فِعْلِهِ يَجْتَنِبُ. So then whatever He commands, He fulfills. So the He, the big He, whatever He commands, He fulfills. small he. And whatever he, big he, forbids doing, he, the small he, avoids. And of course, he is also she. I'm using he in the generic sense, and because that's just the way that things are worded in these texts. Typically, we translate them that way. So if you know your Lord, you would imagine or think of how it would be if you were far from your Lord, which may lead you, or should lead you, to fear and hope. And remember, fear and hope are theological virtues. We fear Allah, and we hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. All right? Of course, there is such thing as fear, which is, which can be directed towards creation too, and when it's directed towards creation, it's not a theological virtue. So a person, whatever he commands, he fulfills, and whatever he forbids doing, he avoids. And then he goes on and says, فصار محبوبا لخالق البشر له به سمع وبطش وبصر. He will then become a beloved of the Creator of men, again, and woman, having by him hearing, force, and sight. So if you fulfill his commandments and avoid his prohibitions, that eventually you will become one of God's beloved. And all of this is an allusion to the Hadith Qudsi, part of which I've already quoted, the Hadith of Man aada li waliyan adhantuhu bil harb, that whoever takes a friend of mine as an enemy, then I declare war on him. وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ. And my servant does not draw near to me with anything more beloved to me than what I have made compulsory for them to do. وَلَا يَزَالُ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. And my servant will continue to draw near to me with voluntary acts until I love him. فَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُهُ كُنْتُ سَمْعَهُ الَّذِي يَسْمَعُ بِهِ. And once I love him, I become his hearing by which he hears. وَبَصَرَهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ. And his sight by which he sees. وَرِجْلُهُ الَّتِي يَمْشِي بِهَا. Or يَدَهُ الَّتِي يَبْطِشُ بِهَا. Or his hand by which he grasps. وَرِجْلُهُ الَّتِي يَمْشِي بِهَا. And his foot by which he walks. So here, this is all a reference to that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, once you're pulled into the full gravitational pull of Jannah, then even if you get the thought of being away from Allah, then it won't even be possible anymore. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He's reeled you in. He's reeled you in, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes a light, or becomes the light by which you see. And so this is another part of this which is important to reflect upon, is the very fact that that in order to overcome the sense of false pride, because we talked about pride at the beginning, in order to overcome this false pride, that one has to truly know oneself and also know one's Lord. Because if you really know yourself and you really know Allah, then you won't suffer from vanity. You won't suffer from false pride, right? Knowing yourself fundamentally is to know your lack of perfection. Knowing God is to know God's protection, His perfection, and that one has to rely completely and fully upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sheikh Mawlud, in his Matharat al-Qulub, in the poem, he actually says, إن تتحقق بصفاتك تمد يا أيها العبد بأوصاف الصمد. So if you realize your attributes, your qualities, you will be given assistance, O you servant, with the attributes of the Eternal One. Right, so if you realize your attributes, you will be given assistance by the attributes of the Eternal One. بالذل والفقر تحقق تظفري بالعز والغنى من المقتدر. It says, and that is with a dhul, which is the insignificant state of the human being, that we're truly insignificant. Az-Zul, the opposite of is az. Az is prestige or sort of significance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Aziz, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has a Kibriya wa Azama, His pride and greatness. And so when you realize that you are Dhalil, that you are an insignificant creation, insignificant being on this planet, especially you think about us in the context of the universe, right? Then you realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the true possessor of izz, the true possessor of prestige and of glory. بِالذُّلِّ وَالْفَقْرِ تَحَقَّقْ تَظْفَرِ. So if you realize your own attributes of insignificance and neediness, realize it, and then you will achieve you achieve yourself prestige and self-sufficiency from al-Muqtadir, from the one with the power to give it to you. Allah is al-Muqtadir. So once we realize our own neediness of Allah, and that the fact we are not what we typically think that we are, it is then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send us His support. So we realize that there are four basic qualities that we have, which are necessary to acknowledge. So one is this, again, az-Zul, which is our insignificance, faqr, our neediness, al-Adz, our powerlessness, wal-Da'af, and our weakness. So insignificant, needy, powerless, and we are weak. So once we acknowledge that and we realize that sincerely, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will give us prestige. He will give us izz. And He will give us al-ghina, affluence, or spiritual affluence, or this sense of feeling a lack of need of anything or anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That once we acknowledge our powerlessness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us qudra. He will give us power, right? Because it comes from Him. And when we now acknowledge our weakness, He will give us quwwah. He will give us strength. So that is the way that it works. And this process, the scholars, they referred to it as, well, not necessarily this, but when we go further than that and we adorn ourselves with asma Allah, with the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or what the scholars of virtue ethics call at-takhallaq bi akhlaqillah, taking on the patterns or behaviors of the Creator, all right? Which in the Christian moral realm they call deification, which is a problem for us naturally because there's no such thing as you becoming like God. However, when understood in the proper sense, that we do have a basis for this understanding in our tradition when we reflect upon the Sahih Hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَلَقَ آدَمَ عَلَى صُورَتِهِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam in His image. Now, of course, we're not talking about corporeal, physical image, but rather, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's given us sight, He's given us hearing, He's given us a number of different faculties to begin with. So similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, He sees and He hears and has power. He does so many different things. He's omnipotent. He's omniscient. Of course, our knowledge is limited. Our power is limited. So it's not like Allah's, but we share in names, but the realities are different. But on top of that, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is compassionate, and we decide to become compassionate because we see how compassionate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, or if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we notice that He is Halim, He's forbearant, and then we become forbearant for the same reasons, that we are fundamentally taking on godly characteristics when we do so. Of course, our modality of those, of the appropriation of those names or attributes, of course, are not perfect, and they can never be perfect. So there's some level of justification for this type of idea. Right, so فَصَارَ مَحْبُوبًا لِخَالِقِ الْبَشَرِ لَهُ بِهِ سَمْعٌ وَبَطْشٌ وَبَصَرٌ. So when all this happens, one then will become a beloved of the creator of men, having by him hearing, force, and sight. وَكَانَ لِلَّهِ وَلِيًّا إِنْ طَلَبْ أَطَاعُ ثُمَّ زَادَهُ مِمَّا أَحَبْ. It said, and he will be for God a friend. If he makes a request, he will give it, plus more, according to his liking. So again, a reference to the Hadith Qudsi, which continues and says, that once he loves him, by become your hearing by which he hears, sight by which he sees, his hand by which he grasps, and foot by which he walks. وَلَئِنْ سَأَلَنِي لَأُعْطِيَنَّ. And if he happens to ask me for something, I will give it to him. وَلَئِنْ اسْتَعَاذَنِي لَأُعِيذَنَّ. And if he seeks my refuge, seeks my protection, I will give him protection. Right. So this will be the result of all of this. At any rate, that's as far I wanted to come in the text today. And after we resume following the break, we'll be going on a break for the month of March. We'll take over from the following verse and talk about, first talking about the concept of even sainthood to begin with, and then go into some other critical teachings in this particular science, inshallah. So if there are any questions and comments, then I open up the floor for that right now, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I don't know if I said that Allah always does what's in our best interests. Perhaps I did say it, but I just want to be sure that it's clear that I'm not saying the same thing as this Mu'tazila would say, which is that Allah must do what's in our best interest. So I don't have any problem with saying that Allah, does what is in our best interest. But we have to be clear that this is a point of theological, controversial area of theology when we start talking about the nature of God. Whereas some Muslim theologians were of the view that Allah must, is something inherent to his nature to do what is in the best interest of the person. So starting with that introduction, so yes, okay, perhaps I did say it, and just I wanted to give the clarification to qualify it. So the question was, for those who didn't hear it, was that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does what's in our best interest, then how do we reconcile that with the concept of istidraj, which is a term which means it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he lures his enemies into believing that they're loved by him, and actually they're actually hated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So istidraj means to lure someone into something. And in this case, the way that Allah does it, and he talks about it in the Quran, that he'll give people whatever they want. Right? Like the hypocrites, for instance. A hypocrite will ask Allah for something, Allah gives it to him. And the hypocrite will believe that, alhamdulillah, I'm special. Clearly I'm special. Or people who are born into this world and they're rich. Some people have the belief or think that the fact that they're rich is a fine sign of God's love of them. The story of the man of the two gardens in Surah Al-Kahf, that was what happened with him. It says, that Allah ma adhunnu anna sa'a qa'ima. That I don't think the hour is ever going to come. I don't think this is ever going to end. I don't think the hour is ever going to come. And even if I am returned back to my Lord, I'm going to find even better than this. Why? Because clearly I'm special. Why would Allah give me this if he didn't love me and think I'm special? Right. So you have people who are in that state. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear throughout the Quran that you don't allow the blessings you see given to you be a sign of my love. It could be a curse. It could be a curse. Now, I guess you say the reconciliation occurs by us not knowing for certain, what these things that we have been given to us for. You follow me? So a person may be subject to Allah's plot, right? But none of us knows the mind of God. We don't know what's happening. We really don't know. But all we can do is take steps to ensure that we don't do things that will bring us or produce or attract such of a reaction from our Creator, right? So if we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do that to people who don't believe in Him, or people who disobey Him, and they have no shame about disobeying Him, then we ourselves, we fight against doing things that are shameful, that we try to do things that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? You follow me? So that's all that we could really truly know about it, but that's the reconciliation. It's like, well, I don't know. I really don't know what it is. I mean, my good health today, I don't know. I mean, what is it? Is it, of course it's a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I try to benefit from my health, right? Right? But is there something beyond it? Am I supposed to do with this ni'mah? Right? And if I don't do that thing with this ni'mah, will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transform my state to something different? Do I look down upon people who don't have the same type of health or beauty or whatever it may be that a person may have, or wealth? That you just have to be careful at all times. So that is the state of the believers. Is that الذين يؤتون ما آتوا وقلوبهم وجلة أنهم إلى ربهم راجعون. That those who give what they give and their hearts remain apprehensive, still agitated, because they don't know. I gave what I gave, and I really still not certain if Allah is going to accept this from me. That's the state of the believer, you see. Now, of course, some people will tell you, they say, well, that's not a good state to be in. Or they'll tell you that it's not good to teach, to remind kids that they could die, things like that. They're too young to be thinking about death. Let them have fun, right? Well, I mean, kids die sometimes. They do, so don't, take advantage of your life. Be a good person, don't be reckless. Take too many risks. You follow me? So it's that's just different perspectives about life in the world. So does that help or no? Come on, Rahban. Yes, tell me no. It's kind of not good enough. Continue your question. What do you haven't? What's unclear to you? But the question, I think, is about define. You have to define doing. In that sense, what is Allah doing? Because in one sense, we interpret a lot of things happening to us and for us as, the result of God's actions, and they are on one level. But let's say you have a person, who's worked their entire lives, a lot of effort, right? And they become rich, for instance. Many people, they don't see that as God. They say, no, I did that. Well, of course, we know that Allah did it for you because He's one opened up the avenues to become rich. We know that. We don't know if Him opening up those avenues for you to become rich was a result of Him loving you or hating you. That's what we don't know for certain. Right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from His servants to believe in Him and to serve Him. You follow me? So in that sense, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking out for the best interest for His servant. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you understand what I'm saying? So He gave us the ability to disobey Him. Right? We can disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't force us to obey Him, and He doesn't force us to disobey Him either. Right? But He gives us advice. He gives us direction. Right? He said, do this, Alam naj'alhu aynayn. Didn't we not give him 2 eyes? Walisana wa shafatayn. And we gave him a tongue and 2 lips. Wa hadaynahu najdayn. And we guided him to the 2 paths. Right? The 2 different paths. That's what Allah, He did for us. Right? Look out for our best interests. Right? Right? فَلَقْتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. Then He says, but He has not plunged into the steep road. Right? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا عَقَبَةٌ. Right. So, and what will inform you what the steep road is? And it goes and gives you the examples of things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this is what you should do. Take this way, take this path. You are totally independent and free to choose which one you go down. So Allah is looking out for our best interests. Allah does what's in our best interest. And He gives us the freedom to choose whatever we want. So when we are cursed, and billah, God forbid, or we are blessed and graced to go on the right path, you follow me? Part of it is because of our own efforts, right? And again, propulsion. Good deeds propel us towards Jannah. Bad deeds propel us towards the fire, right? So it just depends on what type of deed. The worse, the greater the deed, the greater the propulsion, right? The greater the misdeed, the greater the propulsion, right? So, is that help now? Okay, great. Yes, Aida.
We have a question online. Can you, well, the question was about when you were referring to the example of staying up at night. Were you specifically referring to praying at night? And can you expand upon what that looks like?
Well, Salatul Tahajjud is a prayer which is performed after going to sleep. Pray Salatul Isha, you go to sleep and you wake up and you pray Salatul Tahajjud. Now, depending on the amount of experience and amount of time you've been doing that, then usually that will determine how long a person is able to stand in a very consistent basis. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, he stood in prayer sometimes for three quarters of the night, sometimes half of the night. And that was his state. And other Sahaba prayed at night as well. So the Tahajjud is considered to be, of all of the voluntary prayers, the most important of all of them and the most significant, especially then since it's occurring during the night, which is deemed to be, especially when people are asleep, it's deemed to be the time when many of the divine mercy and forgiveness, they descend upon the creation during that particular time. It is a tranquil time, as well as we know. The Tahajjud is prayed two rakahs at a time, among other things, So, other than that, I'm hoping that I'm answering the person's question. That's, it's because it's basically the point is just that he's saying that if you're truly seeking spiritual benefit, Imam Shafi'i says this, and also Ibn Raslan is saying, is that that Tahajjud is one of the gateways to goodness, as mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. So if you want to become a person of virtue, then this is one of the ways to do it, because it is a time where you can get closer to Allah. You can brought even closer to Allah than at other times during your 24 hours of wakefulness. Right? Is there anything else related to that? Okay. Any questions here? I see some dozing. All right. If that's it, then alhamdulillah. Anwar, he got scared. I scared you, huh? Huh? Yeah. Yes. For March, we're going to be. There's not going to be any class during March. Yeah, so this will be the last class until April, inshallah. For both the morning and Sheikh Faraz's tafsir class. Right, exactly. Next week there'll be the Ghazali conference, and then we also have our spring break. If there are no other questions, then we can conclude there. Good for me. Give me more time to relax and rest, right? Fintan, nothing? Okay. Barakallahu feek. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wa subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Wa subhana rabbika rabbil 'izzati 'amma yasifun wa salamun 'alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaykum.